We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast. This is Abe, your host. Just got off work. It's 7:30 a.m. Just been chilling for a little bit. Today we're going to be covering another torture device. I don't know. I like sick, twisted stuff and the macabre, you know. Last podcast I was talking about the Star of Bethlehem. Apparently we already missed it, and it wouldn't have mattered anyways because a fog hit Kentucky, like a deep, thick fog. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know, you could put on your tinfoil hat and perhaps maybe it was weather manipulation that we weren't supposed to see this constellation, or not constellation, but the planets align, maybe, because we know that the elite are into some dark art stuff, so maybe they didn't want us to see the Star of Bethlehem, which it actually is Jupiter and Saturn aligning, so I don't know, whole lot of symbolism there, you know, Satan being Saturn, Jupiter being Jehovah. A lot of weird stuff, you know. Who knows, but we missed out on it. I'm off tomorrow, but I'm going to see if I can go in because I'm going to take the overtime while I can get it. So who knows? We shall see. But yeah, that's about it. I got Sammy a cruiser, which I think I talked about that on the last episode. I don't think there's anything else really going on in my life as far as updates. So we'll get into the main topic. The pillory is the torture device we're covering today. The pillory. Hawthorne says in his immortal Scarlet Letter, "This scaffold constituted a portion of a penal machine which now, for 2 or 3 generations past, has been merely historical or traditionary among us, but was held in the old time to be as effectual in the promotion of good citizenship as ever was the guillotine among the terrorists of France. It was, in short, the platform of the pillory, and above it rose the framework of the instrument of discipline, so fashioned as to confine the human head in its tight grasp, and thus hold it up to the public gaze. The very ideal of ignominy was embodied and made manifest in the contrivance of wood and iron. There can be no outrage, methinks, against our common nature, whatever be the delinquencies of the individual, no outrage more flagrant than to forbid the culprit to hide his face for shame." So basically public shaming ceremony. This quote-unquote essence of punishment, the pillory or stretch neck, as a slang name for it, can be traced back to the remote period in England and on the continent, certainly to the 12th century. In its history, tragedy and comedy are equally blended, and martyrdom and obloquy are alike combined, seen in a prominent position in every village and town. Its familiarity of presence was its only retrieving nature characteristic. Near churchyard in public square was it ever found. Local authorities forfeited the right to hold a market unless they had a pillory ready for use. A description of a pillory is not necessarily to one who has read any illustrated history of the English Church, of the Quakers, Dissenters, or of the English people, for the rude prints of the political and religious sufferers in the pillory have often been reproduced. Dowse, in his illustrations of Shakespeare, gives 6 different forms of the pillory. It was an upright board, hinged or divisible in twain, with a hole in which the head was set fast, and usually with 2 openings also for the hands. Often the ears were nailed to the wood on either side of the head hole. Damn, I didn't know that shit. You don't see that in the images. They nailed the ears to the... Oh! That just hurts thinking about it. Examples exist of a small finger pillory or thumb stocks, but are rare. It would be impossible to enumerate the offenses for which Englishmen were pilloried. Among them were treason, sedition, arson, blasphemy, witchcraft. Hey, I take anger at that one. Perjury, wife beating, cheating. I ain't gonna lie, I've been cheated on multiple times, so yeah, stick them in the pillory. Forestalling, forging, coin clipping, tree pulling, gaming. That's fucked up. Just for what? Playing games? Dice cogging, quarreling, lying, libeling, slandering, threatening, conjuring, fortune telling. Well, I'm a fortune teller, so I would have been put in the pillory. Prigging. I don't know what that is. Prigging? I'm going to have to look that one up. I'm scared to look it up. Drunkenness, impudence. One man was set in the pillory for delivering false dinner invitations. Wow. Another for a rough practical joke. Wow. Once again, wow. Another for selling an injurious quack medicine. No, that one's deservable. He could have killed someone. All sharpers, beggars, impostors, vagabonds were liable to be pillared. So fierce sometimes was the attack of the populace with various annoying and heavy missiles on a pillared prisoners that several deaths are known to have ensued. On the other side, it is told in Chambers' Book of Days that a prisoner, by the sudden collapse of a rotten footboard, was left hanging by his neck in danger of his life. On being liberated, he brought action against the town and received damages. The pillory in England has seen many a noble victim. The history of Puritanism, of Reformation, is filled with hundreds of pages of accounts of suffering on the pillory. When such names as those of Lytton, Prynne, Lilburne, Burton, and Bastwick appear, as thus being punished, we do not think of the pillory as a scaffold for felons, but as a platform for heroes. Who can read, unmoved, that painful, that pathetic account of the punishment of Dr. Bastwick? His weeping wife stood on a stool and kissed his poor pillared face. And when his ears were cut off, damn! She placed them in a clean handkerchief and took them away with emotions unspeakable and undying love. Defoe said in his famous Hymn to the Pillory, "Tell us, great engine, how to understand or reconcile the justice of this land. How Bastwick, Prynne, Hunt, Hollingsby, and Pye, men of unspotted honesty, men that had learning, wit, and sense, and more than most men have had since, could equal title to the claim, with oaths of Fuller, men of Fowler fame. Lecture Day, as affording in New England, in this pious community, the largest gathering of reproving spectators, was the day chosen in preference for the performance of public punishment by the pillory. Hawthorne says of the Thursday lecture, "The tokens of its observance are of questionable cast. It is in one sense a day of public shame, the day on which transgressors who have made themselves liable to the minor severities of the Puritan law receive their reward of ignominy. Thus Nicholas Olmsted in Connecticut is to stand on the pillory at Hartford the next lecture day. He was to be set on a lytle before the beginning, and to stay thereon a lytle after the end. The disgrace of the pillory clung, though the offence punished was not disgraceful. Thus in the year 1697 a citizen of Braintree, William Vesey, was set in the pillory for ploughing on a Thanksgiving day, which had been appointed in gratitude for the escape of King William from assassination. The stiff old Braintree rebel declared that James II was his rightful king. 5 years later, Vesey was elected a member of the General Court, but was not permitted to serve, as he had been in the pillory. So it haunts you for the rest of your life if you'd succumb to that particular punishment. Throughout the Massachusetts jurisdiction, the pillory was in use. In 1671, one Mr. Thomas Withers, for surreptitiously endeavoring to prevent the providence of God by putting in several votes for himself as an officer at the town meeting. Voting fraud! Oh, that deserves more than pillory in this nation right now. Was ordered to stand 2 hours in the pillory at York, Maine. Shortly after, for he was an ingenious rogue, he was similarly punished for an irregular way of contribution, for putting large sums of money into the contribution box in meeting to induce others to give largely, and then again surreptitiously taking his gift back again. What a crook! Sounds like Mr. Biden. There was no offense in this southern colonies more deplored, more reprobated, more legislated against than what was known as engrossing, forestalling, or regrating. This was what today be termed a brokerage of speculative sale, such as buying a cargo about to arrive and selling it at retail, buying a large quantity of any goods in a market to resell, or any form of huckstering. Its prevalence was held to cause dearth, famine, and despair. English regrators and forestallers were frequently pilloried. Even in Piers Plowman we read, "For these iron men on this mould and most harm worcheth. To the poor people that parcel mail, Beigen, thy Riken tharo regrette." The state archives of Maryland are full of acts of resolves about forestallers, etc., and severe punishments were decreed. It was in truth the curse of that colony. All our merchandise brokers today would in those days have been liable to be thrust in prison or pillory. In the year 1648, I learned from Maryland archives that one John Gonier, for perjury, was nailed by both ears to the pillory. 3 nails in each ear. Damn! And the nails to be slit out, and whipped 20 good lashes. So you got whipped and your ears nailed to the boards. The same year, Blanche Howell willfully, unsolicited, and unasked, committed perjury. the said Blanche shall stand nailed in the pillory and lose both her ears. Both the sentences were executed, so they cut her ears off. In New York, the pillory was used, under Dutch rule. Masek Martens, accused of stealing cabbages from Jansen, the ship carpenter living on, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that boat, was sentenced to stand in the pillory with cabbages on his head. Truly this was a striking sight. Dishonest bakers were set in the pillory with dough on their heads. So public humiliation. Pretty much whatever crime you had to have it sitting on your head, apparently. At the trial of Masek Martens, he was tortured to make him confess. Other criminals in New York bore torture. A sailor, wrongfully, as was proven, a woman for stealing stockings at the time of the slave riots, cruel tortures were inflicted. Yet to Massachusetts, under the excitement and superstition caused by that tragedy in New England history, the witchcraft trials, is forever accorded the disgrace that one of her citizens was pressed to death. Yep. Yeah, this gets into the Crucible, man. Giles Corey. That's a true story, man. They pressed him with rocks. They put like a board on him and then just kept adding boulders until he just literally got crushed to death. It's insane. And the thing is, he wasn't even a witch. It was like false accusation. The story of his death is too painful for recital, which I actually had the story of his death within the Crucible form. I could actually probably find it and read it for you all, maybe on another episode if you want. I tell you what, I'm actually going to try to do some homework from between now and the next podcast, so that way I could actually find that scene. Maybe that's what I'll do the next podcast on, is the Farmer Giles, his suffering under being pressed to death. Mr. Channing wrote an interesting account of the Newport of the early years of this century. He says of crimes and criminals in that town at that time, the public modes of punishment established by law were 4, VIZ, whatever that means. Executions by hanging, whipping of men at the cart tail, whipping of women in the jail yard, and the elevation of the counterfeiters, and the like, to a movable pillory which turned on its base so as to front north, south, east, and west in succession, remaining at each point a quarter of an hour. During this execution of the majesty of the law, the neck of the culprit was bent to a most uncomfortable curve, presenting a facial mark for those salutations of stale eggs which seemed to have been preserved for the occasion. The place selected for the infliction of this punishment was in front of the State House. A conviction and sentence in Newport in 1771 was thus reported in the daily newspapers, among others the Essex Gazette of April 23rd. William Carlyle, I actually used to know some Carlyles, was convicted of passing counterfeit dollars and sentenced to stand 1 hour in the pillory on Little Rest Hill next Friday, to have both ears cropped, to be branded on. That's actually funny because the Carlyle that I know, Bruce Carlyle, he actually had one ear, so I wonder if it's like a family curse thing. I would not be surprised. Branded on both cheeks with the letter R, to pay a fine of $100 and cost of prosecution, and to stand committed till sentence performed. Severe everywhere with the punishments awarded to counterfeiters. The Continental bills bore this line: to counterfeit this bill is death. In 1762, Jeremiah Dexter of Walpole, for passing on 2 counterfeit dollars, knowing them to be such, stood in the pillory for an hour. Another rogue for the same offense had his ears cropped, so cut off. Mr. Samuel Breck, speaking of methods of punishment in his boyhood in Boston in 1771, said, "A little further up State Street was to be seen the pillory with 3 or 4 fellows fastened by the head and hands and standing for an hour in that helpless posture, exposed to gross and cruel jeers from the multitude, who pelted them constantly with rotten eggs and every repulsive kind of garbage that could be collected." Instances of punishment in Boston by the pillory of both men and women are many. In the Boston Post Boy of February 1763, I read, "Boston, January 31st. At the Superior Court held at Charleston last week, Samuel Bacon, of Bedford, and Miriam Fitch, wife of Benjamin Fitch, of said Bedford, were convicted of being notorious cheats, and of having by fraud, craft, and deceit possessed themselves of 1,500 johans, the property of a third person, were sentenced to be each of them set in the pillory 1 hour, with a paper on each of their breast, and the words cheat wrote in capital letters thereon, to suffer 3 months' imprisonment, and to be bound to their good behavior for 1 year, and to be paid cost. And to pay cost. I'm sorry, I apologize. Big difference. From the Boston Chronicle, 1769, November 20th, we learn from Worcester that on the 8th instant, one Lindsay stood in the pillory there 1 hour, after which he received 30 stripes at the public whipping post, and was then branded in the hand his crime was forgery. The use of the pillory in New England extended into this century. On the 15th of January, 1801, one Hawkins, for the crime of forgery, stood for an hour in a pillory in Salem. So there you go, back to Salem again, and had his ears cropped. The pillory was in use in Boston, certainly as late as 1803. In March of that year, the brigantine Hannah, quote unquote, was criminally sunk at sea by its owner, Robert Pierpont, and its master, H.R. Story, to defraud the underwriters. The 2 criminals were sentenced, after trial, to stand 1 hour in the pillory in State Street on 2 days, be confined and imprisoned for 2 years, and pay the costs of prosecution, as this case was termed, a transaction exceeding in infamy all that has hitherto appeared in the commerce of our country. This sentence does not seem severe. The pillory lingered long in England. Lord Thurlow was eloquent in its defense, calling it the restraint against licentiousness provided by the wisdom of past ages. By the way, that is a hard word to pronounce. Look at that. Licentiousness. I hope I pronounced it correctly. In 1812, Lord Ellenborough, equally warm in his approval and endorsement, sentenced a blasphemer to the pillory for 2 hours, once each month, for 18 months. And in 1814, he ordered Lord Cochrane, the famous sea fighter of Brosque Roads fame, to be set in the pillory for spreading false news. But Sir Francis Burdett declared he would stand on the pillory by Lord Cochrane's side, and public opinion was more powerful than the judge. By this time the pillory was rarely used, save in cases of perjury. As late of 1830 a man was pilloried for that crime. In 1837 the pillory was ordered to be abandoned by Act of Parliament, and in 1832 it was abolished in France. So there you have it. There's the accounts of the pillory Crazy, right? I do have a little bit of time, so I will do a Saint of the Day segment, and then we'll call it quits on this episode. So stay tuned. I'm going to take a little break. I'll be right back. All right, December 21st, 2020. The saint of the day is St. Peter Canisius, Canisius. He lived from 1521 to 1597. If St. Peter Canisius ever gets his name as a patron saint, he should have been the patron of the overworked. Born in Holland, he got his Master of Arts degree at age 19 and never slowed down until his death, nearly 60 years later. A preacher and teacher, he became a Jesuit priest after his graduation. So there you go, Jesuits. I've already done an episode on them. You can go back and check it out. Secret society, man. He founded colleges, did missionary work, cared for the sick, and wrote incessantly. His letters alone fill 8 volumes. When someone, undoubtedly exhausted from just watching him, asked him how he coped with his workload, St. Peter replied, "If you have too much to do, with God's help, you will find time to do it all." St. Peter was right. God does help us when we ask for help. The problem is we often fail to recognize the help when it comes. The story is told of a man who prayed to be rescued from a flood. A rowboat, a powerboat, and a helicopter all came by and offered him a ride. But he said that he was waiting for God. When he drowned and entered heaven, he asked God why he wasn't rescued. God replied, "I sent a rowboat, a powerboat, and a helicopter. What more were you waiting for?" When we ask God for help, we can trust it will always arrive. We just have to be on the lookout for its form it will take. This is a quote. Do I ever make more work for myself? Do I take on tasks I don't need to because they make me feel needed or necessary? When I feel overworked, I will ask God to help me find a way to get it all done, and I'll be sure to look for the answer. So, I know right now a lot of people aren't overworked because of this pandemic, this virus. It's funny how if you take a corona test and you open up a thing of applesauce and then put that corona test in it, it tests positive. Strange, ain't it? Yeah. There's a little red pill for you. I hope you all have a good day. I love you all. Stay tuned for more. I'll do that little homework assignment though, and I'll see if I can find Farmer Giles' account of being crushed alive by stones. If you guys are into that macabre type of stuff, I like it, you know. I know it's not conspiracy theory, I know it's not paranormal, but I just kind of wanted to keep this podcast open-ended, you know. I don't know, it's entertainment. And it's history. It delves into witchcraft, and I don't know. You all have a good day. Stay tuned. Please like and subscribe. Check us out on Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, Radio Public. Check us out on YouTube under the name Abe Williams. Profile pictures of Dreamcatcher. Please like, subscribe, please share. And, you know, that's it. Have a good day.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.